Hola amigos, ¿qué tal? Stuart here from Spain Speaks with an update on the current situation here in Spain and tensions between Spain and its biggest neighbour to the south, Morocco, are rising, and the Spanish government has even started to deploy troops to the autonomous city of Ceuta. But more about that in just a moment. Firstly, a big thanks to all of the people that left comments on the last video. Lots of comments, lots of debate happening there as usual. Thanks to people that supported the channel by buying merchandise, and thanks to my patrons on Patreon for your continuing support. Now, let's get into the news. And as I said, things are heating up between Spain and Morocco. A bit of a political crisis between the two countries. As we can see here, Spain deploys the army to the border with Morocco in face of the unending wave of migrants. Rabat stops controlling the border after a COVID-positive Polisario Front leader is admitted to a Spanish hospital. Monday will be remembered as the day of the thousands of Moroccans who managed to swim in along the breakwaters separating the Tarajal and Benthou borders in Ceuta. Since 2 o'clock in the morning and up to the time of writing, when they are still arriving, more than 5,000 people have entered the autonomous city by sea, and among them there could be at least 1,500 minors, some of them even babies just a few days old, according to the government delegation. So, as we just saw, apparently 5,000 people getting around those border controls between Ceuta and Morocco, some of them swimming into Spain, and tensions are high between the two countries because Spain decided to allow one of the separatist leaders from that West Saharan separatist movement there in Morocco into a hospital to be treated for COVID-19. So, what has Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez said on the matter? Well, he came out this morning and said that Spain will defend the integrity of Ceuta in the face of any challenge. The president of the government, Pedro Sánchez, said on Tuesday in a message published on Twitter that Spain will defend the integrity of Ceuta in the face of any challenge. My priority at the moment is to return Ceuta to normality. Its citizens must know that they have the absolute support of the government of Spain and the utmost firmness to ensure their safety and defend their integrity as part of the country against any challenge, said Sánchez, who has cancelled his trip to France, scheduled for today. So strong words there from Mr. Sánchez, the Spanish PM. Spain will defend the integrity of that autonomous city in the face of any challenge. So we'll see how Morocco reacts, and this reminds me of another problem that the two countries had some 20 years ago when Morocco invaded a very small island called Perejil and Spain sent in the troops to get it back. Now the Health Ministry is going to decide today on the AstraZeneca vaccine. They're going to decide whether they administer that vaccine to people that have already received one dose of AstraZeneca or whether they vaccinate that collective with a different vaccine. And the Premier of the Madrid community, Ms. Diazo, gave the government today a stern warning when she said if the government does not make a decision on AstraZeneca, we will make the vaccine available to everyone. With all the information gathered to date, the Ministry of Health technicians will finally try to give an answer today to the almost 2 million Spaniards under 60 years of age vaccinated against the coronavirus in the first instance with Vaxzevria, AstraZeneca's commercial name, who do not know how they are going to complete their vaccinations. So we'll wait and see what the Ministry of Health's decision is later today. Will they use AstraZeneca or will people be given a different vaccine? That's the question. Now, an update on the wearing of masks here in Spain. We all know that the summer months are just around the corner. The weather starts to get hot and people are asking the question now that they're getting vaccinated, will we have to wear a mask in the peak months of summer? And the good news is that Spain's chief health expert, Fernando Simón, says that it is very possible that in not many days the use of masks outdoors could be relaxed. Fernando Simón, director of the Centre for the Coordination of Alerts and Health Emergencies, has advanced that it is very possible that in not many days the use of masks in the outdoors could be relaxed, thanks to the good progress of the vaccination campaign against the coronavirus and provided that the epidemiological situation continues to improve. The epidemiologist from the Ministry of Health explained that making the measure more flexible could be considered first by population groups, for example in residences with a high vaccination coverage, and as long as other precautions are maintained. However, he considers that the time has not yet come. So the time has not yet come, but at least the government is thinking about it. And in my humble opinion, the sooner the rules on wearing masks outdoors is relaxed, the better. Now, as we all know, the state of emergency here in Spain came to an end 2 Sundays ago, and people now have the ability to move freely around the country. But unfortunately, especially in big cities like Madrid, traffic jams are again the norm. As we can see here, traffic jams are back in Madrid. Car traffic on the inner M30 ring road is already at 90% of the pre-COVID stage. If anyone had hoped that the coronavirus pandemic would mean the end of traffic jams in Madrid, the hope has vanished. Traffic jams have returned returned with a vengeance to the capital, and in fact private transport traffic inside the M30 is already at 90% of its pre-COVID level. Public transport is also slowly recovering, but at a slower pace, and is still at 65% of pre-COVID levels. So things almost back to normal from a traffic point of view in big cities like Madrid here in Spain. And as the text said, anybody who hoped that there would be a change to traffic levels after the pandemic has seen those hopes disappear. Now, as I mentioned yesterday, the race for tourists has begun between Spain, Portugal, Greece, Italy, and also Turkey, I have discovered. As we can read here, Portugal and Turkey are already ahead of Spain in the race for British bookings. Spain is losing ground in the battle of the main sun and beach destinations to attract British tourists, who as of yesterday can now travel for leisure purposes. This was the main source market for Spain before the pandemic. 1 out of every 4 foreigners who visited us was from this country, hence the importance of recovering this market, which in 2019 alone accounted for 20% of the total expenditure made by visitors to our country, 17.9 billion euros. So the race has begun for British tourists, and as we just saw there, Portugal and Turkey out in front. Now there's lots of talk in the press about people coming to Spain for a holiday, but what about Spaniards who want to go overseas? Where can they go? And this headline here asks the question, where can you travel from Spain? Requirements and destinations for your holidays. Following the lifting of the state of emergency, internal mobility in Spain has been reactivated, and now thousands of Spaniards are starting to plan their summer holidays and possible destinations. When travelling this summer, it is important to take into account the restrictions and measures against the coronavirus at the destination. There are currently 114 countries to which you can travel from Spain, although only 18 of them can be reached without any kind of restriction. Among the 18 countries where Spaniards can travel without restrictions are Mexico, Brazil, Costa Rica, Jamaica, the Dominican Republic, Tanzania, Kosovo, Bulgaria, Albania, Andorra, Northern Macedonia, Romania, the Ukraine, Polonia, Switzerland, Luxembourg, Turkey, and Sweden. So there's a few places that we can visit this year from Spain without restrictions, but the question is how many people are going to be travelling overseas this year from Spain. Now let's have a look at a summary of the health situation in Spain. We can see the accumulated incidence rate for the last 14 days, now sitting at 151. The total amount of cases here in Spain now over the 3.6 million mark. There are currently 6,923 people hospitalised around Spain with COVID, and there are 1,836 COVID patients currently in ICUs. And when it comes to the vaccination campaign, we can see that 15.2% of the population have completed vaccination and 32.29% of the population have received at least 1 dose. Now we all know that Spain has had its fair share of corruption scandals over the last 30 years or so, both at a state level and at an autonomous community level, but they're trying to eradicate the problem and they are now turning to rehabilitation for corrupted officials. As we can see here in this headline from the New York Times, Spain turns to corruption rehab for officials who can't stop stealing. Carlos Albuquerque isn't your typical rehab candidate. He's a 75-year-old grandfather living in Córdoba, a city in southern Spain. He was a town notary before he retired in 2015. He hasn't touched drugs or alcohol in years. But his isn't your typical rehab program. It's an 11-month boot camp to reform corrupt Spanish officials and reinsert them into mainstream society. Repairing the damage is what is left for me in this life, said Mr. Albuquerque, who is serving a 4-year prison sentence for stealing around 400,000 euros, nearly $500,000, in his work drawing up contracts and deeds. So an interesting way of tackling corruption in this country, rehab for corrupted officials. Now let's have a look at some of the comments from previous videos. One here from Sue: what a pity you couldn't take the camera into the wine shop so we could see what it was like and the choices you had compared to the supermarkets. Watch your videos every day and look forward to seeing your comments on the latest news here in Spain. Regards, Sue in Torrevieja. Yes, Sue, thanks for the comment. I did think about filming inside the shop yesterday, but sometimes shop owners are not too fond of people doing that. I could have asked, of course, but I decided that I just wanted to get in and out as quickly as possible because I didn't have a lot of time. But the next time I go to a specialty wine shop here in Spain, I'll see if I can film the inside of the shop. And basically the main difference between a specialty shop like the one I went to yesterday and a supermarket is the different types of wines that you can buy. You can find wines in these places that you're not going to see on the supermarket shelves. For example, in the supermarkets you get a lot of the more common wines here in Spain, and supermarkets generally tend to stock the same wines. Doesn't really matter what the supermarket is, you will find the same wines there. But if you go to one of these specialty stores, you'll find a lot of wines that you haven't seen before, and that's what the attraction is for me. And you can also get get some recommendations from the shop owner on what are some of the better wines that they have in the shop, whereas a lot of supermarkets don't give that service. One here from Simon: I have a question for you regards where you go to in Portugal. You mentioned it is about 1 hour north of Lisbon and obviously on the Atlantic coast. Therefore, are the summer temperatures as high and overpowering as the Algarve or cooler? I have visited Lisbon a few times in the summer months and it was warm, but I cannot remember if it was mid-30s plus. Thanks. Yes, Simon, thanks for the comment. I mentioned yesterday that I normally spend my time in Portugal about 1 hour north of the capital city, Lisbon, in a place called Peniche. I did quite a few videos from there last year, I think in July and August, so if you want to check out what that area is like, you can have a look at some of those videos. And the weather there is absolutely fantastic if you compare it to some other parts of the Iberian Peninsula, especially in those summer months where most of Spain and Portugal can get quite hot. This particular part of Portugal has a microclimate and the temperature rarely gets above 25 degrees Celsius. It's a little bit humid, but it's not very hot, and the times that I've been to Lisbon in August, it has been quite hot and quite humid, but in the part of Portugal that I just mentioned, high temperatures are not the case. And to be honest, that is one of the main reasons we go there. One here from Carl: I would say the typical Aussie drinks way more than the typical Spaniard. As to the parties, there is a respectable body of opinion that if such a large portion of the population break a particular law, it's not a good law. Yeah, Carl, thanks for the comment, and that is a topic that we could debate. Do Spaniards drink more than Aussies? I don't know. Every time I go back to Australia, it's normally Christmas time, and people normally drink quite heavily at Christmas time, but I do notice that people like to down a few beers, a few wines, a few other drinks down there in Australia, and yes, there is a big drinking culture in that country. And whether they drink more alcohol in Australia than in Spain, I don't know. We'd probably have to go to some type of statistical data to find out the answer to that question, but here in Spain, people do drink a lot, but it's a different type of drinking. It's a longer type of drinking. At the weekend, for example, people often start drinking before lunch and that continues throughout the day, whereas in Australia, drinking seems to be a little bit more concentrated. And regarding the botellón or street drinking laws, as I mentioned yesterday, it is illegal in this country, but people generally turn a blind eye to it, except at the moment when the situation is out of control, and I'm sure the government is going to react and crack down on street drinking in the future. Or at least they should try to crack down, because if you live in one of these urban areas and you have people drinking in the street below, it can be very, very difficult to get to sleep at night. Not to mention all of the rubbish that generally gets left behind and the general bad behavior that a lot of these people have when they drink too much. One here from Airspan 2020: Germans are optimistic for summer holidays in Spain. Eurowings said this week that their extra added flights to Spain were sold out in 4 hours. They are planning in putting even more planes back into service to meet the demand. Germans are desperate to travel, and this year the weather has been particularly cold and wet, still is, which only makes one want even more so to get away. Yes, Ban, thanks for the comment, and it sums up the situation pretty well. Germans are desperate for a holiday because the weather is quite bad at the moment and has been throughout those winter months, and down here in Spain at the moment the weather is fantastic and Spain wants German tourists to visit. And when it comes to the tourism sector here in Spain, I'm sure their slogan for this year is going to be the more the merrier. One here from Nelly Porto: Hey Stuart, I am moving to Madrid on Sunday the 23rd to teach English. I am fully vaccinated and do not require to quarantine. However, my problem is whether on Thursday the 20th the Spanish government will lift the PCR requirements for people coming from the United Kingdom and I can enter without any problems. I'm also an EU citizen and have a one-way ticket. Do you know if the government have fully confirmed this? Yanelli, thanks for the comment. There were a few people asking a similar question after yesterday's video. Is Spain going to allow people from the UK to visit the country freely without PCR testing as of the 20th of this month? And the answer is no, I don't think there's anything official. We saw the tourism minister last week saying that that's what she expected to happen. She expected things to be ready by the 20th, but today it's the 18th. And as I said, I don't think there's anything official. And I did read one story yesterday that hinted to the end of the month. So we'll see if anything changes over the next couple of days, but as I said, as of yet, nothing official. And finally, one here from Lee, reporting from Mil Palmeras on the Costa Blanca, 31 degrees and beach absolutely packed, reminding me of 2019. Nice to finally see a sign of life. Yeah, Lee, thanks for the comment. I saw the images on Spanish television over the weekend that beaches in that particular part of Spain, the Costa Blanca, were very, very crowded. Lots of people flocking to that part of the world from places like like Madrid, some of the interior cities here in Spain, because as we all know, we are allowed to travel freely around the country again, and lots of people took advantage of that fact last weekend. And in fact, every weekend from now on is going to be similar. Lots of people from Madrid are going to abandon the city at 3 p.m. on Friday, head to places like the Costa Blanca, and of course when those summer months get closer, people are going to start going to other beaches around the country. But at the moment, mainly the Costa Blanca, because as we know, it is the closest beach to Madrid, and lots of people here have holiday homes in the Valencian community. On that note, I'll start to wrap the video up. Questions and comments, please leave them in the section below. Debate the situation out as you normally do. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs down if you didn't. I'll see you in the next one. Hasta luego.